I started the journey of self work probably 10 years ago, maybe a little more, and stayed with self work for quite a bit of time. And within the past 4 or 5 years, have recently gone into doing more men's work, sitting with men's circles, co hosting with men's circles. And that's where I met this gentleman we're talking to today, Mr. Ean Wood. Ian joined a men's circle that Camo and I held over the summertime, and those people that you meet and immediately just know that they're supposed to be in your life in some kind of capacity. That was Ian for me. So today in our conversation, Ian and I are going to talk about the men's work that he's been doing since he was a child, how that's parlayed into his grown men's work, and what he's now doing with women's work, men's work, co-ed work, trying to help humanity. Beautiful conversation. Talk a lot about archetypes, imbalances, balances, how to get balanced if you're imbalanced. What are some of the modalities there? So, really great conversation. A lot of good content. I hope you enjoy it. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome back to the show. Today, sitting virtually across from me is one of my good homies that has done a lot of men's work. Has the way we introduced each other was actually through a men's group. My friend Camo, and I, actually mutual friend of ours that I've had on the show a couple times. We did a men's group in the summertime once we could finally meet with people again. And one of our really good friends, Jaron, came and brought you and his brother. And that was my first time meeting you. And I can just say, there's people that have like an aura, like a presence when they step into a room. And you were one of those people, man. As soon as you walked in, it was just like this commanding, like, oh, dude, how do I not know this guy yet? Like, he just looks like right up my alley. He looks like a homie, looks like a brother, and looks like we could just share space eternally. And so I'm so happy to get to know you, Ian. So a little bit about Ian before we get rolling. Ian is involved with the Mankind Project. You've been doing work on yourself. We can call it men's work, but you started this work as a child, right? You've been doing this for a while. That's parlayed into working and holding weekend retreats. You're a coach, you're a teacher, an established writer. You've been published. Your stories are in 3 different languages in 5 different countries. Which, as a budding want to be writer myself, not having written anything of being published yet, like that is such a cool accolade, man. So, dude, thanks for carving time out and being here with us and sharing some of your journey, brother.
Oh man, thank you so much. That was such a heartwarming intro to hear those words, and I felt very similarly meeting you and Camo in your home. It was such a beautiful experience. So I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful that we connected through the path of men's work, and I'm excited to be here today just to dive in and go deeper to what I think is one of the most important topics of our time for sure.
Agreed. And for me, this wasn't something that was introduced to me. I wasn't ready for this information or this type of work until, my personal journey started about probably 10 years ago, 12 years ago. But the journey into the understanding of the benefits of men's work was maybe within the past 3 to 5 years, I'd say. So when you and I met, I was still very new into holding space for men's circles, and I wasn't even the holder of space. I was helping Cam do that. But so this work is still really new to me, but I see so much benefit in the work so far. And I've only been doing it for a few years, so I can only imagine the amount of help and the amount of support that this has offered you in the many years you've been working with this. So how did you get started into men's work? Was this something that you chose to venture into, or was this more of like a, hey, you're coming with me?
Definitely a hey, you're coming with me.
All right. Was that your father or a male figure in your life that took you towards that path?
Yeah, so it was, it's so interesting, and it's such a beautiful thread that weaves because it was from my father, and it was from my father's struggles.
Hmm.
My father, my father had a lot of struggles from the trauma in his life and the mental and emotional ripples of that. So when he was raising me, him and my mom separated when I was young. He was finding his way, really struggling. He went to an alcohol and chemical dependency counselor program or something like that,
Okay.
and heard about these groups of men getting together. All these groups of men are getting together. They're talking about their feelings. They're talking about what's going on inside of them in their minds. So it sparked for him this fire, this passion to be involved. My father's a Leo. He has the most energy of any human I've ever met when it's, especially when it's excitement. So he just, I'm sure, went crazy. I can't fully remember when he first got involved, but I'm sure he just dove in head first blindly. And it wasn't very long until he was connected to the Mankind Project.
Hmm.
I know it was in the late 90s or mid late 90s. So I remember like maybe 12 years old that men started coming to my dad's house. My dad had his own place. He had 5 acres, and they put an inipi, they put a sweat lodge on his
Hmm.
property. The Mankind Project is connected to ceremonial practices from the Lakota people,
Okay.
and they had an inipi on his property. So all these men would come over to go sit in the inipi and sweat and pray, and also meet in groups to just connect, talk about their feelings, talk about what's present, what's real,
Hmm.
do deep shadow work. So yeah, this stuff was around me really young, and at the same, at that kind of same age, my dad was handing me books like the Seven Spiritual Laws of Success, Deepak Chopra, the Four
Hmm.
Agreements, Eckhart Tolle stuff. This was just this was my dad's world. So for me it was this is my dad's world.
Right.
That's kind of how that all resonated. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, my dad, he struggles mentally, and uh, uh, this is a means that really supports him. It was kind of having those blinders on as a young kid to being able to connect the dots to the whole, to the
Hmm.
macro. I was in the micro, and I couldn't see the macro of it all.
Right.
So, it being around me so young was powerful, and yet I was completely blind to what was in my lap.
Hmm.
I
I.
had my soul, my being had its own direction that it needed to go through. So when I became an adult and moved away from my dad, I kind of left all that behind. It was still connected. That thread always was weaving. I was always reading books about the mind, about emotions, about being humans. That was it was a something that stayed with me constantly. But I was like, I had my toes in the water with men's work.
Hmm.
I everything that I did in that realm was really encouraged by my father. I ended up going to the what's now called the NWTA, which is the New Warrior Training Adventure.
Hmm.
This is what the Mankind Project puts on. It's their creation of looking at a society where a lot of people, and we'll talk about men here, a lot of men are cultureless or have lost connection to their culture.
Hmm.
And this connection to when boys get to a certain time in life, having this ceremonial, this deep experience that is the older men taking the young boys away from mom, away from home, away from the comforts, and going, hey, you're going through this journey, going through this adventure that is, you come on the other side. Hey, now you're a man. We celebrate you. You're a man in this community. So I went through that experience when I was 21 with my father, one of my best friends. Super powerful experience. Really, really, really amazing.
Yeah.
And once again, I kind of had to sink back into my own, creating my own suffering, creating my own path, doing my own things. It would be years later, in my late 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, that I started to. It's really interesting because my path that led me back to men's work and work and with humans was how much I love the environment.
Hmm.
I started to care so much about the environment and be so connected to the environment, activism, using my platform to write and make documentaries. All my, my snowboarding writing pieces were about traveling and environmental consciousness. And I didn't really like people for a while. I was like, man, people suck. Like I'm just going to be in the mountains and be in nature. Really focused on activism, but I eventually saw the bright light that was, ah, I'm expecting human beings to care about nature, and they're so hurt and harmed and don't have the wisdom or the teachings that they don't have the care for themselves. How do I expect someone that's in so much pain and trauma to care about the trash that they're putting out into the ecosystem, or the cigarette butt in the water, or whatever it is,
Right.
when they're poisoning themselves, whether it's through what they're consuming in their mouth, their ears, their eyes, whatever. So that realization really hit me in connection to caring about the environment. And I really just had this pivotal point where I said to myself, okay, I've really enjoyed my path so far. So blessed. All this snowboarding, all this play has been so amazing, but I'm ready for something new. I'm ready to really dive in. And that's when I really committed myself to men's work and dove really into the Mankind Project, all the leadership trainings they have, staffing the weekend retreats, interacting with these beautiful men. I got to spend time on the Pine Ridge Reservation, learning from the Lakota
Mm.
people, the Chief Dallas, his wife Becky, all these beautiful experiences that when I decided to dive in, were all there waiting for me. And that's when I really saw the power, the strength, the beauty of men's work, as I finally made a choice that it wasn't led from my father being there. I was actually there because I saw it, because I felt it, because
Hmm.
I wanted to be there and have that be a part of my life. So that's really when I dove in, and definitely why I'm here sitting in front of you today.
Well, that yeah makes a lot of sense. It's one thing to be introduced into something as like like you were saying, like at the beginning you didn't really have an option. It was like dad's like, hey, come on, you're coming with me. And but eventually that work chooses to be your work, right? You choose that work to be your work instead of it being forced on you. And I think that's a lot with a lot of the programs that we have out right now, whether it's a like an AA program or a men's work program or women's work program, whatever kind it is. If it's something that's forced on you, it's so different than it's something when you've chosen to do it. It lands differently in the body. You accept the information differently. There's a whole nother layer that kind of opens up when it's your choice instead of you're feeling forced to. And
Mm-hmm.
it's funny. I have two young daughters. My daughters are 13 and 17, and I've started my work about 10 years ago, like I said earlier. But I've tiptoed around introducing this type of life and this type of work to my daughters, for that same reason, kind of what we just talked about. Like I don't want my daughters to feel like they're forced into this stuff. I want them to have the information and then make the choice when they're ready for it. Now that doesn't mean that as they get older, I'm not that I'm pushing, but I'm now introducing more information to them because I know their mental capacity is able to handle this stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
Monica does women's circles on a regular basis with us, with women's groups up here. We have a lot of spiritual practices that we hold as just spiritual humans, not necessarily tying it to a men's or women's work. So a lot of that stuff we're slowly kind of introducing into our kids just to see how they like it. And a lot of times they're like, "This is great, love this." And then a lot of times my kids look at me like a confused dog, like, "What did you just
Mm-hmm.
say? Like, what word did you just use that you expect me to know?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of fun to watch them develop their desire or lack thereof to follow this kind of work. But I also realize that a lot of people, they don't find this work until they're in their 30s or so. Our teenage years are a lot of exploration. Our 20s, we think we know everything in the world. Our 30s, we realize we don't know shit, and we try to integrate the stuff we do know. And that's when we start to realize, oh shit, I'm a messed up human being. I need to do some work on myself. And then 40s and 50s is where we start to step into that knowledge and to embrace that knowledge and to put that knowledge to work. So a lot of us, we don't find this work until we're in our 30s or so. So man, just for you finding this at a young age, even if it wasn't your choice, voice, like I said earlier, like I can see the effect that it has on you. Talking to you, seeing and hearing the vocabulary you use, seeing the patience that you have as a human being to let the other person speak. Just like there's this layer of knowledge that I can feel that you have in this understanding of life, and that's such a beautiful thing. Um,
Thank you,
there's a
brother.
couple more things I want to touch on that you mentioned. One of is rites of passage, and I've done a lot of research in the past probably 5 years about what rites of passages used to look like for indigenous cultures, for our Western cultures when we still did have some kinds of rites of passage until everything's kind of just dissolved, and I do feel like there's a big gap in that preparedness to step out into the world on your own, and what those rites of passage might even look like for now, for what our people are now, the situations and societies that we have now. Like some of the rites of passages in the past with indigenous cultures are you reach a certain age, and then you go have a vision quest, right? So here's you're going to go out into the woods. Here's a bunch of psychedelic mushrooms or some peyote, or maybe you're just going to fast for 2 weeks and see what the visions give you. And through that you find out a lot about yourself as a human being, what you're able to control, what you're able to put yourself in front of, and you find that power that's inside of you. Uh, and I think that there's a lot of missteps now because we don't have rites of passages. We don't have like, hey, you're prepared to be a human now. It's like I can speak for myself. I was probably 40 years old. I'm 41 now. I'm 40 years old when I finally realized that there was a child driving this adult meat suit. Right? I had no idea that there's been this small, little, insignificant, not insignificant, I shouldn't say immature. How about that? Immature little child making all the major decisions for this human being, for this adult. Until I found that out, I was oblivious, right? And so once we have those understandings as rites of passages to where we can physically set this child aside and elect the adult, the team leader, your captain, to now take this human adult body and drive it forward now. So I love the idea of finding modern rites of passages. What would that look like to us now? Do you have in your journeys? I mean, does that ring a bell with you? Does that strike a chord as far as like maybe setting up some kind of rites of passages for our current humanity, men, women, whatever you identify as your sexuality or as your humanness?
Yeah. Yeah. And it really is growing. It really is growing. It really is expanding. One of the things to me that I can look back and see and kind of expand out into the more of a view of larger numbers of people is, like you said, realizing that the child is driving the bus. I believe that where we are at as a vast majority, especially in the societies like US and stuff, is it's mostly children.
Hmm.
Their mind, their emotional level is childlike. And I don't say that, I'm not saying that in any degrading tone or anything. It's just like they're the wisdom, the intelligence, the lessons is not being passed down. So how would how would we expect them to move from children to adult when that's not being presented?
Right.
And a rite of passage I see is really powerful because there's a distinct dot in a timeline that says, before this you were a child, now you are an adult.
Right.
Now you are a man. Now you are a woman, whatever the identity is.
Mm-hmm.
Now you are not a child anymore. So I can have in my timeline check in to the habits, the beliefs, the things that happened when I was a child. And I can check in with the lessons, the teachings, the stuff that happened when I was adult.
Mm.
There's a distinct change in my mind, in my system energetically, that I think just in itself is super powerful.
Right.
Even
Yeah.
if it was all that it was that blip that differentiates the two, I can check in with my inner child and distinctly know what that timeline is, instead of just like, there's a lot of talk around inner child work, but if you've never had a rites of passage into being an adult, that label of inner child, that label is very gray.
Mm,
It's not distinct. And on top of it, just the energetic experience that is embedded in our psyche, in our being, that is, now you are an adult, now you are a man, woman, you're an adult, that differentiating of the two. And I think that it's extremely valuable, and it would be hard to quantify, but I think a large quantity of issues are happening because the loss of these kinds of rites of passage. And it's so easy to see the emotional intelligence in general of the world, and especially these societies that are kind of ruling the market and the consumerism, is it's very childlike. It's
right.
very much lacking wisdom and connection to self in an adult manner. So
Hmm.
I think that it's the loss of these rituals is massive. And I don't, those are the words that I'll use to express
Right.
that.
And that strikes a lot of chords with me. And I can honestly say that I've seen the lack of rites of passage and the non-understanding of people holding on to their immaturity with unconscious resolve. They don't even realize they're white knuckling their immaturity. But when you have a conversation with somebody, I mean, that's the easiest way to figure this out right now, right? If you have a conversation with somebody, especially in today's climate, there's going to be probably something you disagree about, right? There's so many options for disagreement. It's political disagreement, mask or no mask, vax or no vax. And I'm not saying one way or the other, but I'm just saying there's so many polarities and opportunities for that disagreement and that divisiveness that when you have a conversation with somebody and for whatever reason you disagree with that person and that person immediately gets upset with you because now that you don't agree with them, they think that you are against them and that now you're upset with them, and now that you don't have an agreement, you're different. And that is such, and I'm sorry, but that's such an immature stance to have as a human being. And I'm not saying it immature to attack anybody,
Right,
but that's showing
right,
the lack of maturity that our
right.
humanity has stepped into. You can have very, very strong disagreements with people and still love them and still understand where they're coming from and where their thought processes come from. You can vehemently disagree with somebody, but still hug them and love them, right? There's a separation between that. But if you can't see that separation, if you're only caught in the emotion of the actual incident, that is not a way to live, right? That's a really, really stress and anxiety and depress induced way to live, because then everybody's against you. And that's a hard thing for your consciousness to not interpret correctly, right? And
Mm,
that, I think that adds to a lot of that, the perceived immaturity that we have as a humanity right now.
totally.
And
It's
to your comment earlier, how people suck. And I remember the first time that I consciously thought that as a broad brushstroke for humanity. I read the book Walden about 10 years ago, Henry David Thoreau. And in Walden, the basis is, this guy that basically has had enough with humanity and decides to homestead in Alaska. And so he goes and he buys this chunk of property in Alaska that his closest neighbors are, I think, 2 miles away on either side. He's very much alone. He's got a small, very, very small cabin with two chairs, one for himself and one on the off chance that somebody comes by. Right. And outside of that, he is on his own and he loves his life because nobody can mess with his energy except for him. Which, at the time, I'm like, dude, that sounds awesome. I'd love to live by myself, not have to worry about anybody's bullshit but me. But, the flip side of that, as kept reading and, marinated on that book and just ruminated about life, we need to put ourselves back into humanity to see what our triggers are to continue the work on ourselves and to continue that offering the work that we've done to humanity. It's so easy to what I call now Walden yourself off and go live in the middle of nowhere and just worry about you. But when you have humanity in front of you, humanity is you, but it's the you that you need to work on. And that's why it triggers us so much, is because it shows that mirror of all the shit that we need to work on that we haven't done yet. And so, as triggering as humanity is, and as much as people can suck, those people need you as much as you need them to show you what you need to work on and to prove that work can be done. Right. And
Mm,
there's like this beautiful give and take with that, and it's not saying that the person doing the work is the person that should be idolized, but, the person doing the work is very aware of work being done. And so when the triggers happen, people doing work can understand that, oh my God, that was a trigger. That's something I need to put on my list to work on. Not just like I'm in a knee jerk reaction and yell at this person for not agreeing with me.
mhm,
So I
mhm.
think there's a lot to be said with that reintroduction of our work that we've done on ourselves back into humanity, to embrace those triggers that come in, because that's going to show us how much work we still need to do.
Yeah, that's a beautiful share, and what really comes up for me when you were starting to talk, it came up, and then at the end is this is the perfect place to look at maturity.
Mm,
How do I handle a trigger?
yeah.
How do I handle a trigger? Do I act like a child and have a temper tantrum? Do I yell at the other? Do I separate myself from them? Do I make them an enemy? Do I shout? Do I try to harm them with my words or with actions? Like, a trigger is a perfect place to look at maturity.
Mm,
Do I have a temper tantrum when something happens that I don't like? I think it's and I think that that's what we see in the world is nobody can handle the smallest trigger, and it's like this response that is, I'm going to attempt to change the entire outside world not to trigger my triggers, instead of being with what comes up for me signaled from the outside world.
right. Yeah. I mean, and that's that, but that's a hard thing for people to look at, is I'm part of the problem. Because originally, I mean, not originally, but a lot of times, I can speak for myself. I was never the problem. It was always somebody else. Why did you just yell at me? Why did you just make me upset? Why did you just do the thing that now I have to ruminate about or do whatever, right? It was never somebody. It was always somebody else. It was never me. But as I started to realize and do the work, I realized it is me. I'm the one that's triggered. I'm the one that is upset by whatever thing that you have done. It's not that you did that thing to upset me, but I'm just upset by it. And when I can step back and take a step back and realize that I'm part of the reason why I'm upset, if not the full reason why I'm upset,
Mm-hmm.
then, I mean, I'm the one that can control me. I can't control your thoughts, your emotions, but I can understand how I'm going to present myself to the reactiveness or the proactiveness of what you've just done, said, or whatever it is, right? And so it gives you that ownership of your emotions, right? Nobody's in charge of your emotions but you. That's you, right? How are you going to respond to whatever's been given to you? Right. And so, it's almost like building the confidence that you need to understand that you are the healer that you've always sought. Right. It's
Mm-hmm.
not somebody else. I'm not your healer. You're your healer. People will help you on your path, but it's all up to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I want to come clean and say that I, for the longest time, was the king of temper tantrums in response to triggers, and they still happen. So when I'm saying this, I'm not sitting in my almighty chair pointing down at everyone and saying, "Hey, when you have a trigger and you act immature, like, that's showing you where you are."
Uh-huh.
I'm so much so speaking to myself still, because those little kid temper tantrums still exist in me. So
Right. It's just that we're now more aware of it. We're aware that the tantrum is happening, and we're aware that there's still work that needs to be done, instead of just the acceptance that the tantrum's just part of the process.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And
It's
and I
being
and I thank you for making that statement, because one of the things that really kind of I thought a lot about when I started my healing journey was, what happens when I'm healed, right? What happens when I'm done? When is my journey done? And I don't I don't think about that anymore. I don't feel like there is a point when I'm going to be like, healed, I'm done, walking away, bitches, I'm fucking good, right? No, there's always something to work towards, and there's always something to work on, and help somebody with, whether it's yourself, whether it's somebody else. But the person walking the path doesn't mean they've won the game. They're just aware that there's work need to be done, right? That's all. There's work to be done. They're willing to do the work, as hard as it might be, as challenging, as fearful as it might be, but they just understand there's work to be done. That's the main difference, right? There's a
Yeah.
consciousness about it now.
And I'll say this is the beauty of what I've found in sitting in circles of men. Also, I've sat in circles of with all genders, but it's sitting in, since we're talking about men's work, sitting in circles with men. This is the beauty of, and why I continue to show up to sit in circle, is that that is part of the play. This is the play. The play is all of this.
Mm.
All of this is what we came here to experience within this framework of reality, is all these different forms of stimulation that I have stories around being good or bad, and stimulate a trigger in me or whatever. This is the play. And I get to sit down, and it's getting to the point where I get to sit down with other men, and my anger, my sadness, my grief is as playful as my silliness, my happiness, my joy. It's all an expression of what is true inside of me at that moment that I'm there. That becomes the play. How true can I be to the depth of my feeling in that moment?
Mm. Oh, I love that, man. That's beautiful, and that brings the honesty to it. That brings that full spectrum honesty to it.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. Well, with masculine energy, there's a lot of really good examples of toxic masculinity. If we look at archetypes, there's the warriors, there's but we see a lot of, say, the toxic warrior, the toxic king, and I think that's one of the main reasons why a lot of men's work is really important to do, because there are balanced masculine energies that are very beautiful and very loving, but it's the balance that happens. It doesn't say that there aren't balanced leaders out there that are showing positive divine masculinity, but it just seems to be that the broad brush stroke example that we see, whether it's political leaders or tech giant leaders, they're these very toxic male energies. At least that's what's being portrayed by the media or by whatever spin that we look at. Um,
Mm,
and it's kind of hard, because a lot of times we don't realize that
mm,
for example, like Donald Trump is a role model for a lot of people because of the way that he holds
mhm,
himself and the way that he seems to be that no nonsense, get shit done fucking bureaucrat kind of guy. But what he is exempling is the extreme amount of toxic masculinity that is available to us, right? And it
mhm,
sucks because it's showing that toxic masculinity in some kind of ways, in some kind of eyes, seems like it works, right? And I air quote
mhm,
works, right?
mhm,
Now I'm not justifying this person, but I'm not demonizing. I'm just using as an example of what that toxicness can look like. Um,
mhm,
but that's an example of like brazen toxicness. There's also like underlying toxicness. There's people that kind of hide the toxicity of what they are because they understand there's
mhm,
a game to be played, right? And so
mhm,
with that understanding, the some of the goals, or not goals, maybe the focuses that we have in these men's groups is to highlight some of the positive masculinities
mhm,
and bring in some of the divine femininities into our lives as well to help find that balance.
mhm.
So with the groups that you work with and that you either attend or hold, does that seem to be something that you guys focus on as far as the balancing of male energies, or is it a lot of it is the false stereotypes that we feel like we're forced to live towards? So do you feel like with your groups, are you working towards balancing those type of ideas or those kind of concepts that come up on a regular basis?
I got a mouthful full ready in response to this, because I see so many beautiful threads weaving here.
Yeah.
First of all, I think that the word toxic is a bit gray.
Mm,
It's not accurate. It's lacking detail.
mm,
That actually what we're looking at is imbalances. Toxic is a very interesting label, because think of something that's toxic. It's just toxic. You can't do anything about it being toxic. It's toxic is very powerful.
Yeah.
But what we're really seeing here is imbalances. And it's a beautiful tie to the archetypes and immaturity and maturity. Because once again, in the Mankind Project, they really focus on the four archetypes of the king, the warrior, the magician, the lover. These are the archetypes that I judge as most easy to find in each of us as men. There's lots of different archetypes. I think these four are a great pillar for us to stay connected to. And there's a great book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, for anyone that wants to go down that road. It's a great book. And they talk about the immature and the mature, the immature and the mature of each of these archetypes, and how in the immature and in the mature, there's bipolar shadows. And this is what we're talking about with toxic men. We're looking at the bipolar shadows of these different archetypes. It's not, and once again, that word toxic masculinity is once again, I think, missing so much, because what that really is a man that wasn't supported properly, a man that wasn't nurtured, a man that wasn't cared for or passed the wisdom or the teachings that he needed. So labeling, pointing at them and labeling them as toxic, like, I understand the point of it, but it's like, if we can move to a place of, oh, I can feel or see or hear the imbalances in that man. For me, even, referencing that in my system right now, it feels so differently. I can look at someone that I don't like, that I judge as the toxic masculine. And when I switch that to, wow, I can really feel the imbalances in that man.
Right.
It's completely different. There's potential to change. And I can have compassion of, like, yeah, they probably didn't have a healthy male figure in their life. That makes sense that they'd have imbalances and be lost in the shadow, the bipolar shadows of each of these archetypes.
Yeah.
So when I sit with other men, and there's a lot of different frameworks, but the one that I know the most about is directly related to these four archetypes. We visit these four archetypes every time we sit down, and there's different themes, there's different feelings, there's different gateways to all these archetypes. And that's kind of the thread for each time we sit down, is getting in touch with the lover, which is emotions, which is feelings, that sensitive side of self, that younger side of self. We get in touch with the warrior, that is the anger, that is the setting boundaries, that is the action, that is caring for others and doing things, putting energy out into the world. The magician, thought, fear, analyzing, logic. And this is when we go into deeper shadow work, because we're using our mind to judge and have opinions and use our tools with our mind. Oh, this guy could use this facilitation. Oh, this guy could use this process. So that's, going into that magician. The king, oh, okay, let me find the king in myself and let me bless myself. Let me bless others. Let me bless whoever it is, and feel this energy of looking at the kingdom and having this energy of caring for it and wanting the best for it.
Yeah.
So we follow those archetypes, and in my own path, what's most powerful about all of this is when it stops being just mental words that are said and regurgitated, because that's how it has to be started out.
Right.
But I'm feeling them inside of myself. I'm attuned to what that feels like in my body. I can be like, oh man, I'm all fired up. Someone crossed this boundary. I need to do something. I know what that feels like in my system, and I know that I'm connected to that warrior archetype. Oh, wow, my gosh, my daughter's running up and showing me this art. Let me really just be attuned to my lover and meet her in this special place of emotions and connection. this is a practice.
Hmm.
This is a practice when we live in a world that is so mind dominant and not connected to how that feels in our system, but just an opinion about it, a story, a label, a belief. Let me have a conversation about it, but not how does this feel inside of me, and how do I know when I'm embodying this aspect of self? So
Hmm.
that's where I really see the importance of these archetypes in circles like this.
Yeah. And thank you for reframing that for me, man. There's times where we use vocabulary that is incorrect and we don't realize it just because it's what's been presented to me. And that toxic word is just a word that I've heard a lot for the imbalance that you said. And it's funny because I never realized how toxic that word is, right? So when you said that, it's like with toxic waste, for example, we just put toxic waste into a place that because we know it can't be fixed, right? So we just
Yeah,
bury toxic waste or we
yeah,
send it into the ocean or something. We're not
yeah,
condoning that by any means, but
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
we don't try to purify the toxicity. We just label it as toxic and be like, ah, fuck, we're screwed. Get that out of here.
Yeah.
So thank you for giving me that different vocabulary because the imbalance, when we hear imbalance, then we know that we can find balance. We've all been
Hmm.
on teeter totters in our lives, or we've all had some kind of like fun balancing game that, when you're out of balance, you put a little more weight to the other side and you find your balance, right? So we know that balance is achievable where we
Hmm.
don't know that toxicity is undoable, right? If we're
Hmm.
toxic, we're just toxic. Now we're Ninja Turtles, right? How are we going to get
Hmm.
back from being a Ninja Turtle, right? So, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
The bipolar shadow is another chunk of words that I really appreciate you introducing me to because again, like bipolarness, we know that vocabulary word, we know that term, and so we know how to do work around bipolarness. Whether it's a medicine to do or a work to action, but we know that there's an attempt to cure or to right an imbalance of a bipolarness. And so again,
Hmm.
like just giving vocabulary words that are used to that we can fix with, not just words that we throw away like toxic. Like toxic is just like you're screwed, get out of here. These
Hmm.
things bipolar, these things imbalance, we can find balance. So thank
Hmm.
you for introducing those to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, man. And that's again one of the reasons I love talking to you. You have this way of framing things that we don't realize we're talking it, whether negatively about ourselves or about somebody else until somebody reframes it for us. And
Hmm.
just like our conversation earlier, I could have seen that as my damaged ego could have been like, well, I didn't mean it like that, and could have been like backpedal, ego, ego, ego.
Yeah.
But I see you and I feel you and I know that whatever you're saying comes from a place of love and trust and just the wholesomeness of the world. And so I'm
Yeah.
able to just accept that understanding and change my thought process instead of like holding on to like, no, I'm going to use the word toxic.
Right.
You know?
And once again, like I'll bring in that and thank you is the beauty of experience in I've never really said that out loud before.
Mm,
So you I'm speaking to myself as much as I'm speaking to you or any listener about the word toxic.
right.
I'm in a discovery right now with you, and that was probably the most I've ever really talked about that out loud. So it's our discovery together. So I'm thankful for it as well to really correct that. I love when I can find words that I realize I no longer want to cast that spell anymore.
Hmm.
And I've been doing it a lot lately with should, just catching the most minute shoulds. And now I think I'm putting this word toxic in there with it of let me catch when I use
Mm.
that I no longer believe rings true or it isn't direct enough, and let me put in a new one.
Yes, should is one of those words for me too. I had a friend, within the past 6 months, start telling me on a regular basis, stop shooting all over yourself. And I'm like, wow,
Yeah, I love
that's
that.
appreciate that. Should do this, could have done that. No, man, I'm right here. I'm doing what I do. We're on this path. Oh man. So with your work, do you mainly work in men's groups, different ages of men's, or do you involve women's, different genders, different identifiers within groups that you work with? Not that you're saying you like, not that I'm saying that you
Yeah,
only accept one type of
yeah,
person,
yeah.
but is the work that you're doing starting to expand more?
I think there's another beautiful story in there that I went deep in with the Mankind Project. I had this really strong intuition come to me that I was going to work a lot with the feminine, with women.
Mm,
I had this feeling when I was really deep working with Mankind Project. It just came to me. There was no data or anything. So I started to go in the direction on my own of sitting in circle with my father and his wife at the time. I sat with them in circle to sit with men and women and bring both energies together in this same place. That a lot of these things are different, between the energies, but we can come together and really talk the same language and support one another in a very similar way. So I very heavily headed in the direction of, okay, I'm not sitting with just men anymore. My path took me really strongly that way. And once again, I think that the divine is sending me some clues, is calling for me. I came down here to Mexico over a year ago
hmm
where I had been asked. I first came here 3 years ago, and there were some men down here that had caught wind that I had a past with men's work. And so I started helping them organize a circle here in Todos Santos in southern Baja. When I came a year ago, it just happened. I was in, this place has this, to me, has a really strong feminine energy.
Okay.
And there's really powerful women here doing really powerful things. I see them with this just, I don't know, it's beautiful to see the strength of the feminine down here. But I felt and saw what seemed like a lack of that for the masculine.
Mm,
It wasn't something, it was just an opportunity. I moved here, it presented itself. Men wanted to sit in circle. I have this history of sitting with men. So I just brought that framework here to Todos Santos, and we started a circle with some other men. That's been going on, on and off for a year now.
beautiful.
And I really am being called and pulled back into the importance of this. And I'll try to articulate this clearly, that what I feel, what I see is that the world has been dominated by what I would label as imbalanced masculine for a long time,
Right.
because it became a technological, physical fight of brute force and the logical mind, and like kind of this fighting energy that is so easily to connect to the imbalanced masculine.
Right.
So what's really coming up for me is how important this is, because with it being what I would call the dominant energy of our time, and I use that word dominant very purposefully,
Right. Yeah.
as we're coming back into a balance of masculine and feminine being representative equally, well, I can feel the importance of working with the masculine when it's the dominant energy. And I can feel, even in myself, I have to work through, where is the colonizer in me? Where is the patriarchy in me?
Right.
And I believe this is a truth for no matter what your gender is or however you identify, is that we've all grown up in a world that in the collective consciousness is highly dominated by imbalanced masculine.
Yeah.
So I see the importance of really diving in as deep as I can in myself and in containers of other people, that this is extremely important to work with the masculine, because it has been so imbalanced on a, you know, in a large scale for some time now.
Right.
And that it's something that has to be, you know, I visualize Neo going into the agent, like when he dives
Uh,
straight into him, is
uh,
like, we have to dive in straight into the map. Not we have to, we have the opportunity to, and I see it beneficial to dive straight in to the masculine and look at all these imbalances. And once again, I'll bring it in, even in such a powerful conversation, find the play of finding homeostasis and balance. And that feels really powerful for me right now in a group of men. I feel it really powerfully no matter the gender, but I feel it really powerfully in the circles of men that have been raised looking at a world, especially as a little boy, trying to learn what it's like to be a man, and looking at the examples that are all around and going, okay, I'm going to imitate that because that's what a man is.
right.
So really sitting down with other men and going into that just feels really potent to me for right now at this time.
I agree, man. There's so many times that I've sat with men now, and that the some of the common themes are, you know, I don't feel like I can share my emotions. I don't feel like I can experience my emotions. I feel like I have to be the breadwinner. I feel like all these male stereotypes that no one, I can't say that. I mean, I'm sure there's certain people that were raised that way, like their dad sat them down and be like, you know, you're the man of the house and you're the breadwinner and all this stuff. I can't say I was not raised that way. Those are just stereotypes that have just been carried over into what I expected that my male experience needed to be, right? So provide for my family, well, establish a family, provide for that family, work my ass off and never know that family, right? Don't take vacations, just continue to work until you die, right? These are all things that like nobody told me I had to do, but that was the life I was living until I finally realized I didn't need to live it, you know? Are you familiar with Terrence McKenna and his
Mhm.
okay, right? So Terrence McKenna wrote a book a while back called the Food of the Gods, and
Mm.
in that book he talks about I don't know if it's his theory or a theory he adopted and stood behind, but it's the stoned ape theory. You know, like when we were
Yeah.
hunters and gatherers, you know, the
Yeah.
gatherers were going around and they're like, oh, there's a mushroom, and they eat the mushroom, and then all of a sudden they're transported into New York Times Square in 2025, and they're like, who the fuck, what the hell, Unc? It was like totally confused, right? And so, but one of the things that I love the way he talks about this is the societal shift that he saw. Again, I don't know if it's his theory, but one that he talked about in this book. But the societal shift that's seen from going from a matriarchal society where we were plant medicine based into a patriarchal society where we're more fermented medicine based, right? And so he talked about when we were plant medicine based, like when we were eating mushrooms and we were eating, you know, like the plant medicines of the world, whether we know what we know now or what was known then. These plant medicines opened up our divine femininity and balanced that imbalanced masculinity. I almost said toxic, but there you go.
Nice.
You know, and so with these plant medicines, we found the matriarchal society where we honored the divine feminine, and through those societies, we lived in these villages that were usually about 100 to 150 people. It was all usually shared commonality, right? So everybody was having sex with everybody. So all the kids were everybody's kids. And that was the way it was raised. Everybody always had somebody around them to help raise them. You know, it wasn't, that's not my kid, get away from me. It's like, hey, child, come over here. You're hungry. Let me hold you and feed you. There was this very loving community. And he draws a conclusion that once we started taking fermented medicine. So once the fruit fell off the vine and sat there and fermented, and then we ate that and got intoxicated by the fermentation of that, the rotting food, the sugars, that's when the
Oh,
masculine started to come up, and that's when all that aggression and that dominance and the domineering kind of nature started to show its head. And that's basically where we've been. That's, alcohol's been legalized for centuries, plant medicines have been demonized for centuries. And a lot of that goes back into the patriarchal society demonizing plant medicines because they felt the strength and the confidence that these fermented medicines gave the male ego, and that's what they chose to move forward with. You know, that stuff like that, it blows my mind when I read that. And then that was written in the 60s, and I don't even know when that concept was developed. I could have been before that, and
yeah.
that information is just readily out there. And I'm not saying that what Terrence has written was right and that's gospel, go by it, but that's great information to layer into conversations like archetypes and imbalances and balances. And what are you putting into your body that might be helping or hindering the balance that you do or don't have, you know?
Ooh, ooh,
Yeah.
damn. That was powerful. That was beautiful. Thank you for bringing that.
Yeah. And I can speak from personal experience when I finally cut fermented medicines, quit drinking alcohol basically out of my system, I I physically changed as a human being. Like I could feel myself um just shifting and shedding some of that imbalance that had just been part of my body that I thought was just part of me. And I didn't even realize it was an imbalance and it was something, an outside force that was affecting me until I was able to finally get the strength to shed alcohol from my diet and from my system.
Mhm,
And now I still utilize plant medicines, and but I do
mhm,
feel those plant medicines work with me instead of hindering me. But it's still
mhm.
something we have to be conscious of. I'm not just saying go out there and smoke weed all day and you'll be fine,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's a way to abuse plant medicines just like there's a way to abuse fermented medicines, right? It's
Right.
being conscious and aware of how whatever you choose to use is working with your system, why you're ingesting this medicine, this whatever
Mhm,
it is, and having an intention around it. And I think that
mhm.
intention, the consciousness around anything will change the potential imbalance or toxicity of whatever the thing that you're introducing into your being or body is, right?
Mm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, I love Terrence McKenna. That's a really interesting one that I kind of find myself going back to quite a bit with the fermented medicines and the plant medicines.
Yeah, I'm gonna check that out for sure. That seems potent. The only time I had heard of the stone ape theory was on Paul Stamets' Fantastic Fungi movie or whatever.
Great documentary. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a good one. There's so many good there are a lot of really great docs out there right now about plant medicines and about indigenous cultures. Not to pivot or anything, but I've had COVID 2 weeks ago and got laid out for 10 days and spent my time watching the Gaia Network and all those fun things and just really
Right.
ingesting a lot of that content. And there's so much good information out there right now
Yeah.
about on a regular basis about the work that you want to do in whatever kind of capacity that might be, or finding out about these different modalities of healing that used to just be kind of like considered woo woo or kind of hush hush. People hear about these things but never really action them. You can find this stuff on a regular basis now.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Hell yeah, man.
Beautiful.
Definitely.
Definitely a big part of everything that's happening. The books, the teachings. It's potent right now.
Yeah. Well, with your men's groups that you're holding and the desire to have co-ed groups, where is that? What does that look like for you in these next few months for you? Are you, you said you sat with or sitting with men's groups, but are you working towards these co-ed groups that are potentially on the horizon for you?
Yeah, it's I think they're both there. I'm doing both. I just happen to be right now part of the creation process of the men's group here.
Mm,
I don't have a creation process right now that is an in-person container for men and women, but I put things on randomly, sporadically here and there. But it's what I really see is, and it's interesting because my life has swung fully in the other direction. The teachers I work with now are women.
okay.
My main teachers right now are women. And I sit in containers with hundreds of women with maybe 5 men in them.
Mm,
And so I've like kind of swung the other way in what the main input of maybe direct information from a teacher is, but it's all this beautiful overlapping, and it's like the tide going in and out. There's all this mix and crossover. So for me, I very early on had these feelings, these ideas of how it would evolve and how I see it evolving, that, you know, people sit in containers for masculine energy, people sit in containers for feminine energy, and then those people come together and share with one another. And really, that I see that right now, I think I see the importance in the gender connected to the energy. Mankind Project has transgendered men come, like this is happening. It's global. It's happening.
Yeah.
I'm not I'm not the one to have the words to explain all that properly, but I see that these containers of people sitting for masculine energy, these containers for people sitting feminine energy, and then them working together is what I see in the future, because there are even humans that identify as women that know masculine energy more than people that identify as men.
Right.
That's just the truth. Some women are just very masculine,
Right.
and vice versa. So what this becomes is this beautiful opportunity for us. We talk about imbalances, and I'll bring it a little bit into this masculine and feminine energy dynamic, is that as me, I'm very imbalanced masculine.
Okay.
I'm not saying that in a negative way either.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying it just plain as day. I'm very imbalanced masculine. And what that means to me is I'm very, I found myself, and this is something I worked on very directly, is very disconnected from my body and my intuition and my emotions and my felt senses, my receptivity, all of these things that I learned very powerfully from women.
Right. Yeah.
And so I become more balanced myself because I have experienced and have nurtured and worked with understanding the feminine energies inside of myself. And oh, wow, now I'm more connected to my body that has all this information for me all the time, that I can connect to my logical mind to analyze and utilize that information. What a beautiful tool that I've been so imbalanced with, because I've been so put in my mind and disconnected from my body, because boys don't feel. Be a man, be smart, be a computer guy, be a handyman, whatever, all this stuff, imbalance. So there's this beautiful, and same with women. Women are, I mean, the deeper I get into this portal, women are pushed into being so masculine, disconnected from their bodies, in their minds, always thinking. Like, it's happening on both sides, all sides of gender.
Right.
That everyone has, not everyone, a lot of people have been very much forced into experiencing the world from the masculine energy. And this is the opportunity to balance, and I see it, my journey so clearly for myself is as I become balanced and I become more connected, and as I learn from others that are very connected to their feminine energy, how to find that in myself, how to empower that in myself, how to grow and nurture that in myself. Wow, I'm becoming this really powerful, more whole human that has, double the amount of tools for this human experience.
Right. Yeah, and you touched on something that, actually a lot of things, a lot of the words you just used were, just triggered me a lot, but the intuition thing, that, that one for me, that's something that I'm personally working on right now is my intuition. I'm reading a book right now, called So You're Intuitive, I think it's called.
Nice.
And great book. I can't remember the author's name off the top of my head, but basically, it talks a lot about how, we've just been taught to ignore our intuition for a long time, and especially with male imbalance. I grew up in the South, and again, I was never really told to ignore my intuition, but I was also never taught to embrace it. Like, the only embracing of intuition that was a phrase is trust your gut, right? Trust your gut. You hear that a lot as a guy. Trust your gut, man. Trust your gut. But outside of that, like, visual intuitiveness, feeling intuitiveness was all taught to be feminine, right? And then, and that, as a man in the South, you don't want to be seen as feminine, right? You're a strong man, right? And that's what we're told to be. And so a lot of times we've kicked our intuition off to the side and not put any merit into it, and it's become this atrophied muscle that all of us have. All of us have the ability to be intuitive, but we've just lost that gift because we haven't practiced it. And so, being a 40-year-old man now and just finally realizing that sometimes the feelings that I have, or the buzzings that I hear, they have messages in them. And this whole time, I've just been ignoring these messages, and now I'm trying to strengthen that muscle. So, that's why I love the idea that you're talking about, still having, separate gender or separate group, group work, but then bringing those groups together so you can really hear what everybody is saying, and you can hear the imbalances that you might not be able to feel from the side that you're not on, right? You might not even realize that women are forced, in a way, to become more masculine to keep up with the pace of the world, if you've never actually sat down and had that conversation with somebody. And given that perspective and seeing that side from somebody else might give you, like, oh my God, like, I'm going to soften my approach by so much just because of this one phrase, this one comment that this person said, and vice versa, right? That person might not realize that you've been forced to ignore your intuition your entire life, or that you've never given your thoughts or emotions any merit because you were never taught that they were worth giving merit to, right? And that gives that just sheds that light as to, like, oh my God, this human is as broken as me, right? We're all in this path together. We're all working on something. And so when we understand that we're all working on something, or we're on a path, a little bit of leniency is given, of like, oh, I see you. I see your work. I see what you've done from the last time I met you. This is great. You're doing good. Maybe it's a misstep, but we're all good, right? I understand you, and we're going to help each other together. And I think, if, a lot of humanity, like that, with our conversation earlier about, if I don't agree with you, then you're wrong and I'm upset with you, right? That means you're against me. When we can find this healthier, more mature way of processing information and letting it just be the information that comes into us, we process it through our consciousness as pure as we can get it, and then we allow that information to be in our body in some kind of way. That, I think, will give us a little bit more, compassion, a little more humanity, a little more karuna for our fellow human, to know that they're going through shit too. And maybe a lot of times, it's not even a lot of times. It's in my opinion fact, but the triggers that you see within somebody else is really just a reflection of you, right? It's not that person is attacking you. It's just it's showing you exactly where your work needs to be still, what your focus needs to be still, why you're still, thinking this way, in this manner of thinking. But, if we don't have those people in front of us, and we don't have that sounding board to bounce that stuff back on, sometimes we don't even realize it. We're just going to live that life the way we feel it's supposed to be lived.
Mm. Hmm. It's I think that's that connects beautifully to this importance of those, that dynamic that was just spoken about, of it's a journey. It's opening a large door for anyone to step into, either, whatever energetic container that is, whether it's masculine or feminine. To step into either of those containers in itself is a big thing. And to be quite honest, I think that that's where we're at. That's the most important step. That's the largest step needed on a global scale is stepping into these containers, masculine, feminine energy, and really just getting to learn about self, getting to know about self and how that connects and feels in self. It's it's just wild at this point where so many humans are at, that just emotions alone, that gets really more tied to the feminine energy.
Right.
But that's one that's easy to go. Men and women have emotions. You can't argue that. Men and
Right.
women have emotions. You don't think a man has emotions? All right, what is he when he's angry?
Right. Exactly. Right.
What is he when he's afraid?
Uh-huh.
So, and just emotions alone that can be worked on in any container, it's one of the most important tools for the human experience. It's one of the most important tools for the human experience. It is the key tool that is interpretation of life.
Hmm.
And it really is, and why my focus so much so is just ground level. I care so much just about opening the door,
Right.
because there's so many doors in my judgment that are in need of being opened, that someone can sit in a circle and go, oh my gosh, I don't tell anyone this, but I'm really feeling sad right now. I could cry, and then maybe crying.
Right.
Or like, wow, I feel guilt. Or wow, I feel shame. Or I feel really happy right now, actually. Or, whatever it is, this ground floor. That's the most potent thing about these circles and sitting together, is that there's some sort of regular basis of checking in with self and sharing it with another. This is how I feel in this moment.
Right.
Let me share that transparently with you. And the ripple effect that goes around the circle of intimacy and transparency, this like permission,
Hmm.
this permission to feel, that just ripples around. It's why I love checking in. It's become this play is, how real can I be? How real can I be in the way that I show up in this circle and just share something so foundational of, this is how I feel. Truth, drop it. Sadness, grief, whatever it is, just show it transparently. If that's what I did the rest of my life, I would feel my life was just beyond amazingly magical. If all I did was sit in a circle, show up transparently, share my emotions, and give another man permission to dive deeper into what he truly feels, I think I could do several lifetimes with that being all that I do.
That's beautiful. And it's such a powerful thing. I've you know, spoken with a lot of men that have been hesitant to sit in circles, and but the fact that they're asking questions shows me, okay, you're gonna go. You just gotta, check your boxes first, get your shit ready, and some of those guys that, okay, I'm gonna go. I don't think I'm gonna say anything. I just want to observe. Cool, yeah, do you, man, whatever works, right? And they maybe be like the third or fourth person in the share circle, right? And I can see it coming down to them, right? The person on their left shares, and now it's their turn, and I can see the fear in their eye. But then all of a sudden, everything lifts up, and they share for 15 minutes or 10 minutes or something way beyond of, I don't even know if I'm going to say anything. I just want to observe. But it's like you said, like, we don't need to give permission. We don't need to receive permission. But sometimes we feel like we don't have the permission. And so when you have these other brothers, sisters, whoever around you open up and crack themselves wide open, that releases something inside of you, and gives you almost this quiet confidence to be like, well, shit, man. One, I didn't realize you were going through something similar to me. I thought this was all just me because a lot of times we don't share the stuff that's going on inside of us, with whoever. But when you hear that and when you have that, it's man that release that can follow that, and even if it's nothing but just that verbal release, that's such a powerful thing in the step for that balance to happen with the masculinity, and so I applaud that, just showing up, so for our listeners that may be on the fence about whatever kind of
Yeah.
work, men's work, women's work, self work, show up and see how it affects you and see what comes out from that. You never have to do anything you're not comfortable doing, but you might surprise yourself at the comfort level that you find when you're surrounded by people that are on a similar path as you.
And I think that that's something that that really just hit me when you were talking is such an importance, and what I'd like to focus on myself is how do we make those open doors more inviting?
Hmm.
How do we make that open door more inviting? Because there's so much unknown. Hey, you want to go sit in a sacred circle of men? Hey, you want to go sit in a men's circle? What the hell is that? Like,
Right. Yeah.
what are we gonna do? So much unknown there that just triggers fear and is shutting down. And that is the beauty is that someone can show up, and we say this at every time in circles. You can pass on everything.
Right.
You don't have to do anything. You simply sit here and observe and find out. And I think there needs to be more of that information shared,
Hmm.
and that I'm really enjoying having this experience right now because I want to make that more clear, to open that door in a way that's not so dark and scary because there's so much unknown.
Right.
Because that is the truth of it, is someone can just come, sit, pass on everything, and just observe men doing what they do within a men's circle, and decide if they want to come back and participate in it. But I think that's a key ingredient. How do we make these doors more inviting?
Right. Well, I think, in a way we're doing that by making them more readily available and making this as, this is part of the culture now. Whereas before, like groups were not something that was a regular basis. It was something you had to seek out. But now there's more of this on a regular basis, and we just talked about our kids. You being exposed at a young age, my daughters, having an understanding of what this is. I think we're slowly introducing the idea of this becoming a regular thing and not being something that only if you're broken you need to go get fixed. It's like, well, if you want to
Right.
be frank, we're all a little broken, so we all need to be fixed, right? It's just owning up to the fact that it's your time and you're ready for it, and it's not weird, it's not abnormal. It's going to become part of our journey. I mean, I was talking to my kids about this not too long ago, but like I try my hardest not to traumatize my kids, right? Verbally, emotionally, any of that stuff, physically, just I've been trying to be the best parent I can. But what we also have to understand is like trauma resonates in a very interesting way. Like trauma for my child, the biggest trauma they could have would be maybe me not buying them the toy that they wanted at Target and they threw some fucking temper tantrum. That's their trauma. That's not intentionally. I didn't do that on purpose. I'm not sitting there beating my child in Target with the toy they can't have, right? I just said, no, you can't have that toy. I don't have the money for it, right? And
Right.
now that's trauma that child's going to have to unravel later on in their life. So I think a
Right.
lot of us, a lot of us humans, like one, some of us might blame our parents for the trauma that we've been through, but they were doing the best they could. I
Right.
mean, dude, lucky your dad found men's work at your young age and a young age in his life, but a lot of that stuff doesn't enter people's lives until they get a little bit older, the ideas of that, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think just the fact that there's countless books about this stuff now. There's podcasts dedicated to men's work, group work, women's work, finding yourself, all that stuff. So I think in a way we're making this now more regular. Some of this mindful stuff is being taught in schools. I wish there'd be a little more being taught about somatic healing, how we can use our breath, meditation, visualization to up and down regulate our bodies to help us manage our anxiety and depression on a regular basis. Kind of like rites of passage we were talking about earlier. Maybe that's stuff that we need to add into rites of passage now that we know this stuff, right?
Mm.
Here's how to be an adult. Here's how to breathe through your problems. Here's how to experience your emotions, right? But so, hopefully, to what you were just talking about, hopefully this is the path to making this more regular and to stop letting this be like, oh, guys can't feel their emotions and women have to now be like breadwinners or, whatever stereotypes we want to talk about.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. It's the more of those doors that are open, the easier they are to walk through.
Definitely, brother. Definitely. Well, I'd like to wrap this up, man. And is there any kind of groups that you're working towards? I know you're in Baja right now. Um, we have, just to put this out there, just more of an accountability thing than anything. But me, yourself, Ian, and our mutual friend Camo are working towards a retreat in the near future. Hopefully within the next like 6 to 8 months or so.
Okay.
So I'm putting that on there just so we keep
Yeah,
ourselves
put it out
accountable.
there.
But is there anything that you're working towards personally with groups that you're working towards in Baja, or maybe I know that you do make your way up to the Northwest every once in a while. What are you working
Yeah,
towards?
I'm mostly online these days. So most of the work I do is online. I do one-on-one. I'm creating group containers online. So that's really where my focus is right now is what I can do online. So my website's eanwood.com and all my stuff's on there. I will be really focusing on this in the near future
Hmm.
to because what I'm really watching evolve, and I've seen this through the connection to men's work, is what level of depth can be reached across the screen with a microphone. The
Right.
the truth is, I've been in what I would label maybe the most powerful containers, if not tied to the most powerful containers online compared to in person.
Wow.
I've really experienced insane depth online. So my focus is really that direction right now. The retreat planning with you and Camo, that's the next exciting in-person stuff. And yeah, I'm really passionate about creating this sort of stuff to be accessible to anyone no matter where they are. So that's my passion right now.
Beautiful, brother. Well, thank you so much for opening the doors, man. You keep talking about these doors that you're opening, but I feel like you're not only opening for yourself, but you're opening up for humanity and giving us a path to walk with, man. And I really deeply appreciate that. As somebody that is now a regular staple in my life, and as somebody that I know that you're helping so many people out there. I love you so much, man. I appreciate all the work you're doing. I see you. I see the help you're doing. You're giving to humanity, and I continue to offer my help if there's ever anything I can do to help you on your path or your journey. Deeply appreciate you, man. So, uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
much love to you, brother. I'm
definitely
really grateful to be here. That was really fun, and I feel like some new potent things came out. So I'm grateful for the opportunity and all that you do.
beautiful, brother. All right, man. You have a blessed day, man. We'll talk soon.
You too.
All right, thank you so much for spending time with Ian and I. We'll leave a lot of information in the show notes, how to get in touch with Ian and maybe be a part of some of the circles he's holding. I greatly appreciate you listening. And if you like what we're doing, please subscribe to the show on whatever platform you're listening on, as well as leaving comments. And also, just put it out there. I started my website, or finally launched my website. It's adamrealhealing.com. You can go on there and learn about energy work, maybe book a session with myself, or listen to the podcast, this podcast, Journey of the Modern Yogi, or the other podcasts that I do, Zen and Not Zen. Please reach out if you need anything. I'm here to help. Love y'all. Obeisance and love.